I never thought my marriage would end with the whirring sound of a printer, spitting out the truth I had been too blind to see. But that's exactly what happened. Emma and I had been married for 8 years. We had built a life together that, on the surface, seemed unbreakable. We had dinners with friends, spontaneous road trips, and inside jokes only we understood. And yet, beneath that perfect veneer, something had been gnawing at me, little moments of unease that I had pushed aside as paranoia. It started with her phone. Once upon a time, Emma would leave it lying around without a second thought. Now, it was always in her hand, flipped face down on the table, or tucked away in her bag. When I walked into a room, she'd quickly switch screens or lock it entirely. Small details, but they added up. Then there was Daniel, my best friend since college. Lately, he had become an almost ghostly presence in our lives. Present, but distant. He used to joke around and drink beers with me on the weekends, but now he was always too busy. Yet, somehow, he always had time to respond to Emma's texts. Suspicion crept into my mind like an unwelcome houseguest. So, one evening, when Emma left her laptop open while she showered, I made a decision that would change everything. I opened her messaging app, my fingers trembling over the keyboard. My heart pounded in my ears as I scrolled, each message between. Emma and Daniel unraveling the life I thought we had. Their affair had been going on for nearly a year. They had used code names, buried messages under work emails, and deleted threads religiously. But technology has its way of keeping secrets, and I found every archived conversation, every half-deleted note. They talked about stolen kisses, whispered, rendezvous, and worst of all, how I was too naive to suspect anything. Fury and heartbreak warred within me. I could have confronted her right then, but I wanted something more. I needed undeniable proof, not just for myself, but for everyone who thought we were the perfect couple. I wanted to expose the betrayal in a way neither of them could deny. So, I printed everything, every message, every emoji-laden confession, every rendezvous they had carefully planned. It took hours, my printer working overtime to document every lie. When the final page dropped onto the pile, I knew there was no turning back. The next evening, I hosted a dinner party, just a small gathering, Emma, Daniel, and a few mutual friends. I played my role perfectly, laughing, joking, pretending. Everything was fine. And then, over dessert, I pulled out a stack of papers and dropped them onto the table. "What's this?" Emma asked, her voice light but her eyes wary. "Read it," I said simply. As her eyes scanned the pages, the color drained from her face. Daniel stiffened beside her, his fork clattering onto his plate. The room went silent except for the sound of shifting paper and shallow breaths. The realization dawned slowly, horrifically. There was no room for denial, no chance to weave another lie. Our friends sat frozen, eyes darting between Emma and Daniel, their expressions shifting from confusion to disgust. "You planned this," Emma finally whispered, her voice cracking. "No," I said, leaning back in my chair. "You planned this. I just exposed it." The fallout was as brutal as expected. Emma tried to justify it, to turn it around on me. Claims of loneliness, misunderstandings, excuses. Daniel, ever the coward, said nothing. In the end, it didn't matter. The trust was shattered, the marriage over. Some might say I went too far, that I should have confronted them privately. But betrayal festers in secrecy, and I wanted the world, our world, to see them for what they truly were. As I walked away from the wreckage of my marriage that night, I felt something unexpected. Relief. Because the truth, no matter how painful, is always better than living a lie. The fallout from exposing Emma and Daniel's affair was swift and brutal. The moment the last printed page was read, the dinner party disintegrated into chaos. Emma stammered, scrambling for excuses. Daniel sat frozen, guilt plastered across his face. Our friends, once oblivious to the deception, stared at them in disgust. Emma's first reaction was denial. "This isn't what it looks like," she blurted out, her voice trembling. I scoffed. "Oh, really? Because it looks like months of betrayal, planning, and deception. But please, enlighten us." She glanced at Daniel, searching for support, but he refused to meet her eyes. "Say something," she hissed. He swallowed hard. I didn't mean for this to happen." I laughed bitterly. "You didn't mean to sneak around with my wife? You didn't mean to mock me behind my back?" I turned to the others. "I want you all to remember this moment, because this is what betrayal looks like." Emma's panic morphed into anger. "You ambushed me. You could have talked to me privately instead of humiliating me like this." "You humiliated yourself the moment you started sneaking around." I stood, pushing my chair back. "You don't get to play the victim." The room was thick with tension. Some of our friends looked away, uncomfortable. Others openly glared at Emma and Daniel. Then my closest friend Ryan finally spoke. "You're disgusting, both of you." He shook his head at Daniel. "I thought you were better than this." Emma tried again, her voice desperate. "Please, we can fix this. Just talk to me." I let out a breath. "There's nothing to fix. We're done." I left without looking back, stepping out into the cold night. I could hear Emma calling my name, but I kept walking. I had made my choice. The aftermath. The next few weeks were a blur of legal meetings, moving out, and cutting ties. The divorce papers were drawn up within days. Emma begged for forgiveness at first, but when she realized I was truly done, her tone changed. She became bitter, blaming me for exposing her in such a brutal way. Daniel? He lost nearly everyone. Our friends turned their backs on him, his girlfriend left him, and his reputation was in shambles. He tried reaching out once, some pathetic excuse about how he was just filling a void Emma had created. I never responded. Some wounds never fully heal, but the truth set me free. I wouldn't let their betrayal define me. Instead, I rebuilt, stronger than before. And as I signed the final divorce papers, I realized something. Exposing them wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my life, and my future. And I had never felt lighter. Would you like to continue exploring what happens next in the protagonist's journey? Perhaps his path toward healing or even a new romance? Let me know where you'd like to take the story. In the weeks following the divorce, I found myself grappling with a strange mix of emotions: relief, anger, sadness. All of it came in waves, unpredictable and exhausting. The house we once shared felt hollow, every room echoing with memories. I didn't want any more. So I left. I packed my bags and moved into a modern apartment on the other side of the city. It wasn't much, just a one-bedroom with an open kitchen and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the skyline. But it was mine. A fresh start. Emma tried reaching out a few times, mostly through email and half-hearted texts. "I just want to talk." "I made a mistake." "I miss you." I never replied. There was nothing left to say. A new chapter begins one evening after work. I found myself at a small jazz bar, somewhere I hadn't been in years. The dim lighting, the soft hum of a saxophone in the background, and the quiet chatter of strangers gave me a sense of peace. I sat at the bar, nursing a whiskey, when a voice pulled me from my thoughts. "You look like someone trying to escape something." I turned to see a woman, her dark eyes studying me with curiosity. She had an easy confidence about her, the kind that made it clear she wasn't just making small talk. I smirked. "And you look like someone who likes to know people's secrets." She shrugged. "Only the interesting ones." Her name was Natalie, a journalist, sharp-witted and endlessly curious. We talked for hours that night, about music, books, even a little about heartbreak. I didn't tell her everything, but she didn't press. She just listened. As the night ended, she smiled. "I don't know what you're running from, but I hope you're running towards something better. Maybe I was. The past comes, knocking. Just as I started feeling like I was moving forward, my past found a way to pull me back. One afternoon, I received a message from an unknown number. Daniel is in trouble. You might want to hear him out. I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting. I had sworn off anything to do with him, but curiosity gnawed at me. What kind of trouble could he possibly be in? Against my better judgment, I replied. Where? A minute. Later, an address popped up. A cheap motel on the outskirts of town. I sighed. This was probably a mistake. But something inside me told me I needed to go. And so, against my better judgment, I went. What do you think? Should we explore what's happening with Daniel, or focus more on the protagonist's new life with Natalie? The motel was exactly what I expected. Run down, dimly lit, and reeking of cigarette smoke and bad decisions. The neon sign flickered erratically, buzzing like an insect trapped in a glass. I parked near the back and took a deep breath before stepping out. Room 207. I knocked twice. No answer. I was about to leave when the door cracked open and a pair of bloodshot eyes peered at me. Daniel. He looked like hell. His once polished demeanor was gone, his shirt was wrinkled, his hair unkempt, and his face was pale, shadowed by something deeper than exhaustion. I crossed my arms. This better be good. He hesitated before stepping back, letting me inside. The room was a disaster. Empty bottles littered the table, cigarette butts overflowed from an ashtray, and the air was thick with stale alcohol. He collapsed onto the bed, rubbing his temples. I messed up, he muttered. I scoffed. Yeah, no kidding. No, I mean, I really messed up. He ran a shaky hand through his hair. Emma, she's ruining me. I clenched my jaw at the mention of her name. And I should care because... He exhaled sharply, frustration laced in his voice. She's trying to pin everything on me. The affair, the lies, the divorce. She's telling people I manipulated her, that I pressured her into everything. Even that night, the dinner party, she's telling everyone you forced her hand because you're controlling and vindictive. I stiffened. She's lying, I know. He let out a hollow laugh. But people believe her. She's already twisted the story to make herself the victim. He grabbed a folder from the nightstand and shoved it toward me. Here, read this. I hesitated before opening it. Inside were emails, texts, even bank statements, evidence of Emma moving money out of our joint accounts before I had even caught her cheating. Emails to a divorce lawyer months before the truth came out. Conversations between her and another man, not Daniel. My blood ran cold. She played both of us, Daniel said bitterly. I was never the end game. She was planning to leave you long before I came into the picture. I was just another stepping stone. I closed the folder, my grip tightening. Why are you telling me this now? Because she's dangerous. His voice was barely a whisper. And I don't think she's done with you yet. A chill ran down my spine. I stood up, gripping the folder like a lifeline. I don't care what happens to you, Daniel. But if Emma thinks she can still manipulate me, she's got another thing coming. As I walked out of that motel, my mind was already racing. Emma hadn't just betrayed me, she had orchestrated everything. And now I had proof. Do you want the protagonist to expose Emma publicly again? Or should he play the long game and turn the tables on her more subtly? I drove home in silence, gripping the folder like it was a loaded gun. The truth inside burned hotter than any anger I had felt before. Emma hadn't just been unfaithful. She had planned my downfall long before I even suspected a thing. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was war. Setting the trap. The next morning, I reached out to my lawyer. I need a forensic accountant, I said, dropping the folder on his desk. Emma moved money out of our accounts months before the affair was exposed. I want to know where it went." My lawyer nodded. "And you want this information to stay quiet for now?" For now. I had learned my lesson. No more public outbursts. This time I'd dismantle Emma piece by piece. The first domino falls a week later. The accountant's report landed on my desk. Emma hadn't just been siphoning money, she had been laundering it. Some of the transactions led to an offshore account, while others funneled into a business owned by a name I recognized instantly: Richard Nolan, a high-profile divorce attorney. Ruthless, known for helping wealthy spouses drain their partners before leaving them in financial ruin. Emma hadn't just been planning to leave me. She had been setting me up for destruction. The counterattack, I needed someone who could outmaneuver Emma, someone she wouldn't see coming. So, I called Natalie. "You look like someone who just uncovered something dangerous," she said as we sat across from each other at the same jazz bar where we'd first met. I slid the accountant's report across the table. "Emma's been moving money, hiring a shark to drain me. I need this exposed, but in a way that makes her panic first." Natalie's eyes scanned the report, her lips curling into a slow, knowing smile. "Oh, she's going to hate what I'm about to do." That night, she published an investigative piece, not naming Emma outright, but describing an anonymous woman siphoning marital funds before filing for divorce, attempting to destroy her unsuspecting husband. It didn't take long for people to connect the dots, and Emma, she lost it. Emma's desperation. The next day, she showed up at my apartment unannounced. "You bastard!" she hissed the moment I opened the door. "How dare you drag my name through the mud?" I leaned against the door frame, completely calm. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You think you can outplay me?" she seethed. "You have no idea what I'm capable of." I smirked. "That's where you're wrong, Emma. I know exactly what you're capable of, and I'm going to make sure everyone else knows too." Her face twisted in fury, but beneath it, I saw something else. Fear. She was losing control of the narrative, and Emma hated losing control. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "You wanted war? You got one?" And for the first time, Emma realized she wasn't the one pulling the strings anymore. I was. Should we continue with Emma's downfall, or do you want to add a new twist to the story? Emma had spent years perfecting the art of deception, crafting lies, manipulating people, and controlling the narrative to her advantage. But now, for the first time, she was playing defense. And I wasn't done yet. A sudden shift. The morning. After our confrontation, I received a message from an unknown number. "Meet me at the Belmont Hotel, room 915. It's about Emma." I stared at the screen, debating. It could be a trap, or it could be exactly what I needed. Curiosity 1. A new player. Enters. The Belmont was an upscale hotel, the kind Emma would frequent when she needed to impress someone. When I knocked on the door of room 915, I half expected to see her standing there, smug and defiant. Instead, I found a man I didn't recognize. Mid-40s, sharp suit, cold eyes. He gestured for me to step inside. "I assume you don't know who I am," he said, pouring himself a drink. "Nope," I replied. "But you seem to know me." He chuckled, swirling the whiskey in his glass. "Let's just say I'm familiar with Emma's habits." I didn't move. "And?" He leaned against the table, watching me. "She's in over her head. She thinks she's still controlling this game, but she's made a few too many enemies. And now, the people she thought she could trust are turning on her." I folded my arms. "Why tell me?" he smirked. "Because I want to see her lose." Emma's secrets exposed. The man, who introduced himself as Adrian Cross, handed me a flash drive. "This contains records of her financial transactions, conversations with Richard Nolan, and other details she wouldn't want made public." He took a sip of his drink, then added, Let's just say she's been playing more than one dangerous game. I plugged the drive into my laptop later that night, and what I found was far worse than I ever imagined. Emma hadn't just been planning to take my money. She had been laundering other people's money. Some of the accounts were linked to offshore businesses, but the real kicker, one of them belonged to a well-known criminal organization. She was using the same tactics she used on me, manipulation, deception, to siphon money from men who wouldn't hesitate to make her disappear. The final blow I had everything I needed. The evidence of her financial crimes, her shady dealings, and her attempts to destroy me. Now I had to decide how to play it. Go to the authorities, let the FBI handle her, ensuring she spends the rest of her life behind bars. Leak the evidence, strategically. Destroy her reputation first, then let the legal system catch up, use it as leverage. Force her into complete submission, making sure she never dares to cross me again. Emma had spent years thinking she was untouchable, but now she was trapped, and it was my move. Which path should the protagonist take? Should he go for full legal destruction, social ruin, or personal leverage? I spent the entire night staring at the flash drive's contents, my mind running through every possible scenario. Emma was finished. I had the power to dismantle her completely. The question was, how? I wasn't looking for revenge anymore. This wasn't about making her suffer for the affair, for the lies, for what she had done to me. This was about ending her ability to manipulate, control, and destroy. And I wanted to make sure she never recovered. The first strike. The next morning, I sent an encrypted email to an old friend in the financial crimes division. I kept the message short and precise. You might want to look into these accounts. Offshore laundering, multiple shell companies, connected to high-profile individuals. I attached the documents. No names, no direct accusations. Just enough for them to start digging. Emma's panic begins. By noon, the first cracks in her world started to appear. Her lawyer, Richard Nolan, was seen leaving his office in a hurry, ignoring reporters who had somehow already caught wind of an unnamed client being investigated for financial crimes. By 3 p.m., Adrian Cross sent me a single text. She's running scared. And by 7 p.m., Emma herself called me. I let it ring 3 times before answering. The final conversation. You bastard. Her voice was raw, shaking. What did you do? I leaned back in my chair, sipping my whiskey. I just let the right people ask the right questions, she exhaled sharply. You think this is over? You think you've won? I smirked. No, Emma. I know I have. There was silence on the line. Then, soft laughter. I underestimated you, she murmured. I should have destroyed you when I had the chance. I shook my head. That was your mistake. You always thought you were the smartest person in the room. But now? I let the words hang. You're just another name on a list. Her breathing was uneven. You don't understand what you've done. These people, I know exactly who you got into bed with, I interrupted. And now, so does the FBI. A pause. Then, for the first time, real fear crept into her voice. You sent it to the feds? I sent it everywhere. The silence stretched longer this time. Then, barely above a whisper, she asked, What do you want? I let the moment linger before. Delivering the final blow, I want you gone, Emma. No more manipulations. No more lies. You disappear from my life completely. She exhaled shakily. And if I don't? I smiled. Then I let your business partners find out exactly who tipped off the authorities. Pure, unfiltered panic. She knew I wasn't bluffing. For the first time in her life, Emma had no way out. Emma's escape 2 days later, she vanished. Her lawyer refused to comment. Her accounts were frozen. Her contacts in high places suddenly stopped returning her calls. And me? I watched. from a distance as the woman who had once orchestrated my destruction became nothing more than a ghost. No power, no influence, no control, just gone. And for the first time in a long time, I could finally breathe. Epilogue, a new beginning. Months passed. The dust settled. I rebuilt my life, moved forward. Emma? Some say she fled the country. Others say the people she once worked with caught up to her. But me? I never looked back. Some betrayals break you. Others, they make you unstoppable. And I was never going to let anyone like Emma control me again. The end. What do you think? Would you like an alternate ending or an epilogue with a final twist? I stared at the photograph for a long time, my grip tightening around the edges. The message was clear. Emma wasn't just alive. She was coming back. For months, I had believed she was either on the run or buried under the weight of her own destruction. But this was a warning, or worse, an invitation. The chase begins. I spent the next few days retracing my steps, reaching out to old contacts, trying to find any trace of where Emma had gone. Adrian Cross, the man who had given me the evidence against her, was the first person I called. "She's gone," he said when I asked. "She vanished the moment the walls closed in." "Then how do you explain this?" I sent him a picture of the note. Silence. Then, a slow exhale. "She's not done with you." No kidding. Unraveling the clues. The marketplace in the photo wasn't familiar at first, but after hours of analyzing the background, I found it. Barcelona. Emma had fled the country, and now she was making sure I knew exactly where to find her. But why? If she wanted revenge, why not strike from the shadows? Why leave a trail unless she wanted me to come after her? A dangerous proposition. That night, I got another call. "Unknown number," I answered. No words at first, just breathing. Then, "You should have killed me when you had the chance." Emma. Calm. Controlled. Dangerous. "I gave you an out," I said, my voice even. "You should have taken it," she chuckled softly. "And let you win? That's not how this works." A beat of silence. Then she whispered, "Catch me if you can." The line went dead. The final decision. I sat there staring at the phone. Emma was playing her final game, a chase across countries, a battle of wits, where the stakes were higher than ever. If I ignored her, she'd keep coming. If I went after her, I'd have to end this once and for all. I took a deep breath, grabbed my passport, and made my choice. Game on. To be continued. Would you like to continue this into a full-fledged international thriller where the protagonist hunts Emma before she gets to him first? I didn't sleep that night. The gravity of the decision settled over me like a suffocating weight. Emma wasn't just a figure from my past anymore. She was a ghost, an enemy in the shadows, pulling strings I hadn't even known existed. But the question remained, why? Why had she reached out? What was her end game? Across the world, I booked the first flight to Barcelona, and by the time I landed, I was already feeling the weight of the game that had just begun. I couldn't afford to make any mistakes. Emma was clever, ruthless, and she had a head start. I started my search in the marketplace from the photograph, but there was nothing, no sign of her. I questioned locals, hoping for a lead, but everything felt like a dead end. Then, as I passed a small cafe on the corner, a woman's voice stopped me. "I know you're looking for her." I turned to find a woman standing in the doorway. She was dressed plainly, but her eyes were sharp, calculating. "How do you know who I'm looking for?" She smiled faintly. "Because I've been following Emma for years. She's not exactly subtle when it comes to leaving a trail." I took a cautious step forward. "What do you know about her?" The woman glanced over her shoulder as if making sure no one was listening. "Not much. But I know she's moving fast, She won't be in one place for long. I nodded. And where's she headed now? The woman hesitated, then whispered, I think you should visit the old lighthouse on the coast. She's been there before, when she needed somewhere to hide. I didn't waste a moment. A deadly trap. The lighthouse stood at the edge of a jagged cliff overlooking the ocean. It was a desolate place, abandoned for years, perfect for someone trying to stay off the radar. I approached cautiously, heart pounding, in my chest. Was Emma waiting for me? Or was this just another dead end, a trick designed to make me feel like I was on the right path? As I neared the base of the lighthouse, I saw a figure standing at the top, silhouetted against the setting. Son, it was her, Emma. She turned slowly, a smile playing at the edges of her lips. You didn't think I'd make this easy, did you? The final confrontation. I took a step forward, trying to control the storm of emotions inside me. I couldn't let her manipulate me anymore. I came. Here to end this, Emma, I said, my voice steady but hard. Whatever game you're playing, I'm done. She laughed softly, her eyes cold. You don't get to decide when this ends. I do. She reached into her jacket and I instinctively tensed, ready for whatever move she was about to make. But instead of a weapon, she pulled out another photograph, a close-up of me, taken in the airport just hours before. I've been watching you, she said, her voice low and threatening. You think you're the one hunting me, but you're already in my trap? The world seemed to close in around me. I'm not afraid of you anymore, I said, taking another step closer. You should be, Emma replied coldly. And in that moment I realized the game had never been about her, running from me. It had been about me running from her, a twist of fate. Before I could react, the ground beneath us shook. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed behind me. I turned just in time to see a group of armed men emerging from the shadows, her people. The ones I'd never known about. Did you think you were the only one playing this game? Emma taunted, her voice laced with venom. I've been setting the stage for this moment for months, and now? She stepped closer, her eyes gleaming with triumph. It's over, but something snapped inside me. This wasn't the end. I wasn't going down like this. In a split second, I made my choice. Fight back or die trying. I grabbed the nearest object, an old rusted pipe, and swung it with all the force I had. The first man went down instantly. The others hesitated, surprised by my sudden burst of violence. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. Would you like to continue the story with the protagonist fighting for his life, turning the tables on Emma once and for all? Or should we explore a different twist to their final confrontation? The rusted pipe hit its mark with a sickening thud, taking down the first of Emma's men. The others faltered, momentarily caught off guard. But that hesitation was all I needed. I lunged forward, swinging the pipe again, this time aiming for the second man who was closest. He stumbled back, barely dodging, but it was enough to slow him down. I used the moment to launch myself toward a jagged rock on the ground, my hands closing around its sharp edges. But Emma's people weren't. Amateurs. They recovered quickly. One of them reached into his jacket and pulled out a gun, aiming directly at me. The cold metal of the barrel pressed into my chest and my heart skipped a beat. You're outmatched, the man sneered, his finger tightening on the trigger, but Emma's voice cut through the tension, sharp and commanding. No! I looked up, and there she was, still standing at the top of the lighthouse, her cold eyes watching the scene unfold. She didn't speak, but I could see the amusement in her gaze, as though this were all part of her plan. I was the prey, and she was the hunter. But that's when I realized something. She wanted me to be afraid. She wanted me to feel helpless, just like she had once made me feel, and I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. The turning point. My mind raced as I fought to think of a way out. I wasn't ready to die. I wasn't ready for this to be the end. Then, as if by instinct, I lunged forward, knocking the gunman's arm aside. The shot rang out, missing me by inches, and I seized the moment. With one swift move, I swung the rock with every ounce of strength I had, connecting with the man's jaw. He collapsed to the ground, unconscious. Adrenaline surged through me. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about control. I turned and sprinted for the lighthouse door, ignoring the pain that radiated through my body. As I reached the entrance, I slammed the door shut behind me, locking it. Inside, I was momentarily safe, but I couldn't let my guard down. Emma was out there, and I knew she wouldn't stop until I was dead. I looked around, searching for anything that could help me. The lighthouse was old and decrepit, filled with the smell of salt and decay. But then, I saw it. A narrow staircase leading up to the top. The final showdown, I climbed the staircase in a blur of motion, every step taking me closer to her. The voices of Emma's men filtered up through the cracks of the building, but I couldn't focus on them. I had one goal: Emma. When I reached the top, I saw her, standing at the edge of the lighthouse, looking out at the horizon as though she didn't have a care in the world. I took a step toward her. "Emma," I said, my voice calm but edged with fury. "It's over." She turned slowly, her eyes locking onto mine. For a brief moment, she looked almost disappointed. "You really think so?" she whispered, her voice soft but filled with venom. I didn't wait for her to make a move. I stepped forward, my anger pushing me forward like a tidal wave. "Yes, I do," she smirked. "You're not the one in control here, not anymore." Before I could react, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device. My heart sank as she pressed a button. A distant sound echoed through the air, the unmistakable whirring of an explosive charge. I froze, trying to make sense of what was happening. "You don't think I'd leave this to chance, do you?" Emma's voice was mocking. "I've rigged this place to blow once I'm out of here. The moment I leave, the countdown begins." I looked around, panic creeping in. There was no time to waste. "I've always been 3 steps ahead of you," she said with a cruel smile. "You're too late." The final decision. My pulse raced as I sprinted toward her, adrenaline pushing me beyond any logical thought. I could see the fear flickering in her eyes for the first time, but she didn't back down. She was ready for this. I reached her just as the countdown on the device started to beep. The pressure was unbearable. I grabbed her arm, spinning her around to face me. "You're not getting away with this, Emma!" "Let go of me!" she screamed, her face contorting with rage. "You don't have the guts to do this!" But in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't just about survival. It was about ending the cycle, about taking back my life once and for all. I took a deep breath, making a decision I never thought I would. With everything I had, I shoved Emma to the ground, pushing her out of the way of the device, and in the next instant, the countdown reached 0. Would you like to find out how the explosion unfolds, or would you prefer a new twist? Perhaps Emma's survival or the aftermath? The world shattered in an instant. A deafening roar tore through the lighthouse, and the force of the explosion sent shockwaves rippling through the air. My body was lifted off the ground, weightless for a fraction of a second, before I was thrown backward like a rag doll. Everything blurred: fire, debris, the sickening crunch of stone collapsing. The sky twisted, flames licking hungrily at the night as smoke engulfed everything in its path. Then, darkness. Pain. That was the first thing I felt when consciousness crept back in, a sharp, searing pain in my ribs, a pounding in my skull. My lungs burned as I sucked in a breath thick with smoke and dust. I groaned, trying to push myself up. The lighthouse was barely standing. Half the structure had crumbled, leaving jagged remains behind. The metal railing that once circled the top now hung at a dangerous angle, swaying in the wind. And Emma? I scanned the wreckage, my pulse hammering in my ears. Then I saw her. She lay a few feet away, motionless. Blood streaked down the side of her face, her hair matted with dust and debris. But she was alive. Her chest rose and fell. Shallow, but steady. For a long moment, I just stared at her, waiting for the overwhelming surge of anger to come back. The hatred, the need for revenge, but all I felt was empty. This woman had destroyed my life, had manipulated me, betrayed me, and played. With my mind like I was nothing more than a pawn in her twisted game, and now she was broken, powerless. I could end it right now. A single move, a single breath, and I could make sure she never hurt anyone again. But instead, I stepped back, because Emma was already finished. She had lost, and for the first time in a long, long time, I was finally free. Epilogue. A new beginning. Weeks passed. The authorities pieced together the truth. Emma's crimes, her manipulations, and the destruction she left in her wake. They took her into custody while she lay unconscious, in a hospital bed. When she woke up, she had nothing left, no allies, no leverage. Just a long, dark road ahead in a prison cell. I should have felt victorious. But closure didn't come easy. I had spent so much time chasing ghosts, drowning in the past, that I had forgotten what life was supposed to be. What I was supposed to be. But as I stood on the edge of a quiet beach one evening, watching the waves roll in under the golden glow of the setting sun, I realized something. I had survived. Emma was gone. The past was behind me, and for the first time in what felt like forever, the future was mine again. And this time, I wouldn't waste it. The end. Would you like an alternate ending, or does this conclusion satisfy you? I stared at the letter for what felt like hours, my mind racing through every possibility. Emma was in prison. That much was certain. But this letter? It was proof that she still had reach, influence, allies. I grabbed my phone and dialed. The one person I knew could help me untangle this. Detective Alan Mercer. He picked up on the third ring. Didn't think I'd be hearing from you so soon. I got a letter, I said, my voice tight. No name, no return address, just one sentence. A pause. Then, let me guess. It's from her. She's still pulling strings, Alan. I clenched my jaw. And I need to know how. Digging deeper 2 days later, I found myself sitting across from Alan in a dimly lit diner, the letter resting between us. I checked with the prison, Alan said, tapping his fingers on the table. Emma hasn't sent any official mail. But that doesn't mean much. Inmates have ways of getting messages out. Through visitors, corrupt guards, even other prisoners. So someone's helping her, I muttered, my stomach tightening. Seems that way. Alan leaned in. You made a mistake, you know. I frowned. What mistake? You let her live. The words hit me harder than I expected. Alan exhaled. Emma isn't just another criminal. She's obsessed with control. And now that she's locked up, she's going to spend every second figuring out how to get it back. I ran a hand through my hair. So what do we do? Alan's lips curled into a grim smile. We find out who's working for her. And then? His voice dropped, carrying the weight of a dangerous promise. We cut her off, for good. The first lead Alan started. With the prison's visitor logs. Emma had only received a handful of visitors since her sentencing. Her lawyer, a couple of reporters sniffing for a story, and one other name that caught our attention. Elliot Vance. The moment I saw it, my blood ran cold. Vance was a ghost. A former corporate fixer who had vanished years ago, only to resurface when Emma was at her most powerful. He had been one of her closest confidants, orchestrating schemes from the shadows. And now, he was back, and he was visiting her. This is bad, Alan muttered, scanning the logs. If Vance is in play, Emma isn't just sending threats, she's planning something. I clenched my fists. Emma was supposed to be finished, buried. But the past had a way of clawing its way back, and if she thought she could still control me, she was dead wrong. Next move? Should we investigate Vance, confront him directly, or set a trap for Emma's next move?